So we are at the point in the course where we break it up and we give you a chance to exercise your constitutional rights of self-expression and tell us what you know about things so far. And all we've done really, we've just done really two things mainly. We've used a couple of springboards from the last class, the 7810 statistics class, and expanded those. The first one we did was we took our understanding of what we knew about correlation and expanded that into simple and multiple regression. And the second thing is we took what we knew about analysis of variance, or ANOVA, and we expanded that into adding another independent variable so that we did a two-way ANOVA. So those are the two things mainly that the midterm is about. And again, you can see from your syllabus when the virtual room is open for the exam to be taken. Again, you get one attempt, so if you make sure you're ready when you're ready. It's just like if you come to class, you can't say, "Gee, I think I'd like to come back and do this next weekend." Well, you're not. You're already here, so if you're here, you got to do it. So, all right. So what I have, and I've got this in part of D2L, and hopefully I punched some of the buttons correctly. That's what the paper version looks like. I did have some trouble getting this to look like I wanted it to on the computer, and I'll explain that as I go along a little bit. So, one of the options it asked me if I want to allow you to do is again, I set it for a 2-hour time limit. If that's a problem, let me know. We'll work around that if we need to within reason. But one of the things they asked me, do I want to let you go back pages? And I've said I do. So if you want to go back and look at number one again, you can back up, and you'll see in a minute where you may have to do that for some of the questions because I give you some information on one page that you're going to need for some later pages because I didn't know how else to do that. Anyway, so here it is. And format-wise, because I'm going to talk about format first because I want to, and you'll tell me you want to if I ask you. So I'm not going to ask you to do it. Format-wise, it's not 20 questions. We're going to play 20 questions. And the first 9 are multiple choice. There is a short 5-item matching section. And then the last 6 are short essay, short answer, and again my normal instructions. And I couldn't get this. I couldn't figure out how to put like general instructions for a section on there. So sometimes I embed instructions in the questions themselves. If I were doing this on paper, I would say something like respond to each item. No response should require more than a short paragraph. You've heard that before. I also say, would I ask for examples? Do not use examples discussed in class or the textbooks. Now, and make sure there's enough of a difference to really be a difference. Okay, here's what somebody did one time. They took like the vitamin C example we did for the two-way ANOVA. If I ask for a two-way ANOVA, they say, well, I can't use the same example, so I'll use the vitamin D. Well, that's not a different. That's not a different example. It's not. Okay, I don't know. It's gonna be the second half of class. We're going to talk about operational definitions, and we'll get into that sort of stuff later. So we need a good operational definition, I guess, for a different example. But it has to be different enough that I think it's different enough. So that doesn't sound fair, but it's up to you to convince me. Anyway, um, so multiple choice matching, short essay / short answer. Nothing more than a paragraph, and I mean a fairly short paragraph. Okay, in regression, we have regression equations, and they're in the form of y equals mx plus b. But I might have a bunch of mx's. We've got analyses to tell us which are good predictors, which are not so good predictors, which predictors are better than others. Um, If I don't give you all of that information, there's still ways to make educated guesses on that. For example, a higher coefficient is going to be a better predictor generally, although not necessarily, because the variables may not be on the same scale. For example, if you're going to predict college GPA from ACT and SAT scores, you're going to have to reduce that SAT number down a lot more than you're going to have to reduce down the ACT number because it's so much bigger. Unless you're told, well, so you really need that information about what came out in those output windows to really tell what the better or worse predictors are. Otherwise, you just kind of have to assume all you have to go by is the coefficients. If they're on the same scale, fine. If they're not, you don't know. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about some likely things about the predictors. I'm going to ask some things about, remember the plain old ANOVAs? Remember that two-step question we asked where it was essentially equivalent to, do you know what time it is? And if the answer is yes, then there's another question. If the answer is no, there's not another question. If you get an overall significance in an ANOVA, what does that mean? It means there's significance somewhere. It means the person knows what time it is. You got to ask, okay, what time is it? And we saw when we asked that second question, we followed it up with a number of different kinds of follow-up tests. We've on that part of SPSS, there are a good half a dozen things we click. We typically click the Tukey, although we've talked about some situations where you might want to at least try out some other follow-ups. But for the most part, you need to know what follow-up is and what kind of follow-up test. I'm not going to ask you anything that we hadn't used a lot. Hint, hint, hint. Back to the regression, we talked about it's based on correlation or based on R. And we know something that if R manipulated a little bit, then we can tell something about the relationship between the variances in the two variables. And that comes into play with one part that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to show you a little bit of this actually, at least show you enough what it is. If I give you part of an SPSS output, for example, like this, can you see that's part of an SPSS output table? So I'm going to give you an output table. I'm going to ask some questions about it. And it's essentially like what kind of things go where. For example, if I have, let me go back to my whiteboard here. On those ANOVA statements like f of 2 and 24 equals 6.34, p equals some value. For example, if I give you the table and ask you to fill in the blanks what those numbers are, it might be a good thing to reasonably know what numbers would go in there from a chart. Hint, hint, hint. Give you a table, an output window, and I say fill the numbers into the blank in this format. You got to be able to tell me what number goes where. And that's gee, I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 4 numbers right there. Hey, that could be like 4 questions. Hint, hint, hint. And that's exactly what I'm going to do for part of that. just want to make sure you know how to get the numbers from the table, put them in the right places. I would want you to also be able to interpret that table to tell what's significant and what's not significant, to be able to talk about whether post hoc should be used for follow up, and if so, for what. I'd want you to be able to figure out some things about effect size from it. Now, you don't have to memorize the what constitutes small, medium, and large, but the number that tells you the effect size. Of the matching section, hey, let me tell you what I couldn't do on matching, and this just drives me crazy. Oh, let me go back. Well, the first thing, now it wasn't the first thing that drove me crazy, but when I give you that chart, the only way I could figure out how to do that is to give you that chart for the first question and tell you in that question, for numbers 7 through 9, consider the following two-way ANOVA output. That's what I had to say. So I can give that to you for part of question number 7, but if you're filling out 8 and 9, you might have to go back and look at that too. For the matching section, and that is just simply, I'll tell you what it is. It's simply knowing what procedures do what. I've got procedures in one column, although I'm not sure if it looks like a column in the electronic version of it, but it's pencil and paper, and my video looks frozen. I don't know if it's frozen on your computer or not. That unfroze it. Okay. So the matching section, usually I have like columns and descriptions. Well, I've got those matched up. I'm not sure if it looks exactly like this or not, but you're able to match them. What I could not do, and I just kind of a good guideline of, yeah, that's part of the question that just got asked online here. I like to have an extra option that will not be used. It's called the distractor. I could not put that in. And the reason I like to do that is not to fool you. It's because if you ever done a matching section and you end up with one option left and one column and they don't match, so you mess something else up that you probably got right. It's not possible to use everything, match it one-to-one, and miss exactly one item. You got to miss more than that. So I like to throw in a distractor so at least it kind of helps you with that possibility. I couldn't do that. And I had a wonderful distractor to go in there. I'll just tell you what it is. It was a distractor about causation, correlation meaning causation, which we know it's not, so you'd never use that. Next question is, well, we have scenarios that we'll have to know which type of test. Not in this one, but you'll have the other direction of that. And you know what those look like. Give me some examples of, or give me an example of. That, by the way, is not in the text or in class. And it's not just changing vitamin C to vitamin D. So I'm not going to, at least right here, I'm not giving you a scenario and asking you which one. Because, again, I'm mainly only asking you about 2 procedures anyway. So the last ones are just sort of general open-ended questions about the particular things about the procedures, including asking you for some examples. The question is, if I ask for examples, will I be going back to previous tests from the last class? No. I'm focusing, and there are tests from the last class that you have to still know because you have to know those to use these. So it's fair game to go back and talk about a nose. That's why we spent some time doing that. But I'm not going to ask you to give an example of just an ANOVA or just a t-test. And again, think about it. We've done 2 procedures. If you know I'm going to ask you for examples, well, you kind of know, kind of think ahead about that a little bit. So, but no, to answer the question on screen, I do not do that here. And the last course I did that some of the tests. I said, if you're going to do such and such, what test would you use? I don't do that here. I may or may not on the final. I don't know yet. Keep asking questions because that's generally all I had to say about it. Not very long. It won't take you very long. I'll give you 2 hours. I don't think anybody's ever needed even most of that. No, the two procedures are well, two-way ANOVA, not just ANOVA, two-way ANOVA. And the regression is really two procedures. It's simple and multiple regression, but they're both regression. That's why I think of them as kind of one. So you know about two-way ANOVAs, which means you have to know about ANOVAs, and know about simple and multiple regression. Other questions? You know when the test is going to open up. You know when it's going to close. So sometime between that. And again, yeah, they all have, yeah, good question. They all have equal points. I generally don't do that because I try to recognize some items are more difficult than others and ought to weigh more. But because I didn't really, I was having so much trouble getting this online, I didn't worry about that as much. Another question is, will the recording, I assume the one we're talking about right now, yeah, that'll be available. I will put the URL out of that. So the test may open up before I get that out, but if you want to see this recording again, don't log in just yet. There, you're there. My normal routine is to get the URLs posted usually the day after I do the lecture of an evening. So I may, well, I may try to get that done a little earlier. Other thoughts, questions, comments? Y'all were all writing like crazy, like that's the first time you've heard any of this stuff. I should just do the exam reviews and not teach class. That way I would have covered all the ground. You don't think that's a good idea? Okay, again, ask me whatever questions you have. But yeah, it is difficult material. That's why it's in a doctoral program. You're right. Okay, thank you.